Welcome, everyone. It's a Wrap with Rap. I am your host, Ron Rappaport. This podcast features people who have overcome life's challenges and adversities, people who can inspire and motivate, and people who can educate us on an assortment of topics. My guest today is George Siegal, founder and CEO of MoveTheWorldFilms.org. George has over 35 years of experience in television and film production. He is the director and producer of The Last House Standing, a documentary film about how everyone needs a home that doesn't blow away, wash away, or burn down. His career started in front of the camera as a weathercaster, newscaster, and sportscaster. George has covered countless stories about people who lost everything in disasters. He has worked in markets from Los Angeles to San Francisco, Seattle, Detroit, and San Antonio, Texas. In 2001, he formed JEL Productions, a video production company that produces commercials, infomercials, television programs, and documentary films. In 2018, he started Move the World Films, where he wrote, directed, and produced the award-winning documentary film, The Last House Standing, where he explores the fact that most people think catastrophic destruction will never happen to them, and they have no idea if their insurance will actually get them whole again. Welcome, George, to the podcast.
Hey, Ron, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I saw the film, George. It was fantastic. It really opens one's eyes to the subject of natural disasters and what we can do to be proactive in protecting ourselves. And I'm encouraging everyone out there to view this documentary. George, please give us a short bio of yourself and what prompted you to transition from broadcasting to film production.
Well, you know, when you were saying all the different things that I'd done, eventually the evolution of my career moved me to being behind the camera, mainly because I didn't like a lot of the baloney that went with being in front of the camera. A lot of the things that you have to do, the way you have to, you're told, you know, what you have to say, how you have to say it, right, stories you can cover. So when I got out of the news business, I decided to start my own production company where you have clients and you have to tell their stories. But eventually that evolved into documentary films where I get to pick a subject, you raise the money to make the film, and then you go out and try to make a project that you hope will make a difference in the world. Because of my experience as a TV weathercaster and as a reporter, I covered a lot of stories where people every year got ravaged by disasters. And it's heartbreaking to go to those places and talk to people who their houses just burned down or it was washed away, or they were in a tornado. And there's this look on victims' faces, that shell-shocked look of they didn't know what hit them.
Yeah.
And what frustrated me is there are ways that you can lessen the chance of that happening to you. It's not always easy. It's not always a simple fix.
Right.
But you don't have to end up like that, because when you do, your life is turned completely upside down. And after seeing that story again and again and again, it just motivated me to want to do something about it.
That's great. Tell us what the goal of making The Last House Standing is. What was the goal?
You know, there's a big goal and then there's a secondary goal. The big goal, obviously, is I wanted to change the way people think. And I want people to be aware of where they're buying a house, what the condition of that house is. Are they getting eye candy, or are they getting an actual building that's a home that's going to survive something? And I bet most people don't know the answer to that question. On a short term, if you can help one person at a time, that's also a terrific thing. If one person goes out and gets something to make their front door stronger so it doesn't blow in during a strong storm or hurricane and tear their whole house down, that's a huge accomplishment, and I would feel fantastic about that. But overall, the whole thing is really a grassroots movement for everybody at the bottom, and that's us homeowners, to do something. Because if we sit around and worry about them the experts solving climate change and global warming and building codes and all that, we're the ones that are going to continue to get screwed every year. So we need to wake up and change the conversation and demand things, because that's the quickest way to fix it. We can't make them build us better houses unless we demand it. And then when we demand it, they'll start doing it.
Right. George, what was your biggest challenge in making the film?
Well, there was a couple. One was getting the people to be in it, you know, because we got some people that are tough to get a hold of. One, because they're very busy, and two, because they don't want to talk to filmmakers. You know, to get the FEMA director Brock Long, was a challenge because
Yeah, I saw him in there. Yeah.
yeah, he was great, a really great guy. But FEMA is always getting attacked for what goes wrong after a disaster because it's such chaos from the disaster that they're in a no-win situation. I'm not telling you they're always perfect, but they're in a very difficult position. They liked the fact that we weren't coming at them to talk about what they might do better after a storm. We're talking about being proactive, and that's one of their big messages is how do we do things on the front side to avoid things happening on the backside. So getting Brock Long was very challenging, and Henk Ovink, who is in the film, he's the water ambassador from the Netherlands who President Obama brought in after Hurricane Sandy to help in New Jersey. And it took over 1.5 years to get that guy because he's so busy.
Yeah.
And I just relentlessly chased him down. And when eventually it came time to booking him, I made sure we had him early in the morning because if you watch him work a room, everybody wants to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
So we got him first thing before everybody else did.
That was smart. That must have been a lot. That must have been a lot of phone calls.
A lot of phone calls and a lot of stress because when you're a small team going out to shoot something like that, if it didn't work out, we spend a lot of money trying to make it happen. And you really can't afford those misses. But he was fantastic, so accommodating when we got him. And he was a big part of the film.
So what's it like making a documentary film about natural disasters?
You know, it's challenging because you have to go talk to people who are victims of disaster. And that's very difficult to do. I'm not the kind of, when I'm producing, I don't like to intrude on people's grief. So you have to be real considerate of that and real understanding that there may be things they don't want to talk about. Their schedule may not be as flexible as we might be because they're trying to get their life back together. And it's a very traumatic thing. We were fortunate to get some great people. All the people in the film were so nice to us and they were going through a lot, but they still gave their time and their stories to what we were doing. And, it's coordinating everything. It's a lot of work to get all the pieces together because again, we were a small nucleus, a small team of people.
Right.
And, that means everybody has to do more than what they might do on a bigger set where you might have a guy that does lighting, you might have a craft services truck, you might have a makeup person, you have a sound person. When you're a smaller crew, you double up and do many things on the job.
So why are the building codes so weak around the country? And is it difficult to get them changed to reflect higher standards?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to get the code changed, as we see time and again. That's a slow process because builders have an entire industry to lobby. They have lobbyists. Right. They lobby to keep the codes from being stronger. And if you talk to a builder, what they say makes pretty good sense. When you're just having a conversation about it, is you can make the code so tough and the house is so expensive, people might not buy them. But when you see the disaster end of it, I think people would. I think it's like cars cost more when they were safer, when you had to put airbags in them, when you had to make them so they could actually save somebody's life. We need people to demand that of a house. But the builders, their goal is to keep the code from being made stronger. I love it when I find a builder that doesn't build the code, they build above code. They build to withstand the hazards that could actually happen in that area. And probably the best example is Mexico Beach in Florida, where we featured the house that truly was one of the last houses standing right there on the beach. Right. And they did a lot to make sure that house survived. Not everybody can do that. But if you're going to have a house on the beach, maybe that's something that you need to do because every house around it was destroyed completely. When they changed the building code after Hurricane Michael, they raised the wind code from 130 miles an hour to 140 miles an hour. That's less than the storm that wiped them out. I think they had.
Yeah, well, what good is that? 5. 10 miles an hour. That's not going to do anything.
It'll do something on a category 2, maybe a category 3, but you get a 4 or 5, it's not going to be enough. So to me, that's an example of they should have adopted the South Florida building codes where it's 175 miles an hour. And, it increases your chances of surviving, of your house still being there after the storm blows through. And, you have to bite the bullet and do it. And who keeps paying for the fact that we don't? Our insurance rates go up.
Right.
And supplies go down because you have to use them to rebuild property and all the delays and problems that's caused by loss of work, schools closing. I mean, it's completely disruptive of everybody's life. So I think we need to do a much better job, but it's a very slow go.
Well, after I saw the movie, uh, I thought to myself, all the times I hear people say, "Oh, we're building up to code." You know, now it's like after people see this documentary and they hear those words, they're going to say, "No, we want it above code."
You know, part of the problem is the real estate market in some areas is so hot right now that if you find a house that they're just doing the average build, and there's a lot of mediocre houses around where we live, where they put wood on the second floor, and you know they're saving money wherever they can.
Yeah.
If you don't want that house, somebody else is going to take it.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have a lot of options. And if the market was the other way around, where you could put your foot down and say, "Nah, I'm not buying it unless you make it better," then you'd have a chance. But the problem is, if you say that, the next guy's not going to do that, and then he's going to get the house, or she's going to get the house, and kind of your protest goes right out the window. But it would be nice if things like Zillow and Realtor.com, if they rewarded on their houses that are better built.
Yeah.
So rather than show that it's near a park or it's got a nice backyard for the kids to play in, it said it's got hurricane strength, hurricane brackets all around the house. It's got double pane hurricane windows to withstand 175 miles. You don't usually see those things in any ads. You see all the eye candy and the fluff. And you know, I think the line in the film that we use is, people care more about the icing on the cake than the ingredients of what's in the cake. And
it's almost like it's like a car, right?
Yeah.
Some people just like the outside of the car.
Exactly. And you know, you can't go to a car manufacturer and say, you know, "I'd like that Volvo, but I don't want the airbags. Could you knock off $750? Could you take the crash resistant doors out?" No, the code changed on those. The standard changed where you had to raise your game. Unfortunately, that's what it might take. But if we can get enough people to put their foot down and demand better, who knows?
Well, I guess that leads up to my next question, which you kind of answered. Why do people have so little information or so blind about the homes they buy and move into?
You want the harsh answer or probably the diplomatic answer?
I want that hard answer.
I think we're stupid and lazy. And I say we collectively, because I'm in that group too. You know, I've just gotten better at it lately, because now that I have a film about this, it's like, how stupid would I look if I didn't have a lot of the things that I'm advocating for other people? So I've inventoried my possessions. I make sure I have the right insurance. I know my house is built to withstand a lot of those hazards. And you know, most people don't worry about it. You know, we've already this year in Florida had a couple scares with potential hurricanes. Yeah. And they missed. They weren't even close. And so what does that happen? You think one hand you could go, wow, this is a wake-up call. I don't think that's what happened. I think people go, see, it's not going to happen to us. We're good. And you just go about your business. Yeah, I can remember about 3 or 4 years ago, being a Floridian like you, I think we had to evacuate like twice, because we're right here on the beach and we had to get off. And again, nothing happened. So, and it's tougher to get you to go the second time, because after you've done it the first time, you're going, well, this is ridiculous. They're just being overly cautious, and you know, there's no reason to leave. And then that's when you get a storm surge or a storm that parks right over you, and you can lose your life. It's very serious. So you have to almost consider that the cost of living in paradise is if they tell you to evacuate, that's probably what you need to do, unless you live in a house you know can withstand it. Right. You know, you need to listen to the experts. I just wish the experts would put more effort into proactively making things better and safer, rather than having a better rescue plan or a better rebuilding plan. Let's stop that from having to happen all the time. Right. Well, hopefully somebody out there in that position will be listening to this podcast. Let's hope. You hope. There's got to be some brave pioneer out there that says, enough. I'm going to lead the charge. And then there's a lot of places that are. Florida's gotten a lot better. I think we're one of the top places in the country in increasing our building codes and doing a better job. I know Alabama's improved in some areas. Texas has, but it's going to take a really big effort by a lot of people to start building more concrete houses, make better choices where you live. Maybe being out in the middle of the woods with no way out and trees all around your house isn't the best idea. Yeah. Is there anything that disaster victims have in common with each other? I think one commonality is there's something they could have done to improve their chances of ending up in that disaster. If you look at all the people in our film, You know, the people in Malibu whose houses burned down, and then we talked about people in paradise. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place and a bad thing happens. Well, then hopefully you had the right insurance for your house. Hopefully your valuables were insured properly. Hopefully you got out important records and things that would make your road to recovery easier than it might be if you didn't do that. People that lives in tornado areas, hopefully they have a storm cellar. Those really aren't that expensive, and when you factor into the cost of what your house is. And I don't know how anybody could live in a tornado alley and not have a storm cellar.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I think it's like 30 or 35%. It's a very small number.
Wow.
You know, and that's crazy to me, because those are so frightening. Moore, Oklahoma, 4 major tornadoes hit them before they changed their building code. And even after the 4th one, they didn't see a huge increase in storm cellar sales. And you can get low financing for that. And then people that were damaged by Hurricane Michael, a lot of them just had houses that weren't built to withstand that. They were older homes that, you know, they didn't account for that back then. The code was much worse than it is now.
George, can you talk about what you call resilient building, and is it prohibitively expensive? And I know in the film, it was mentioned that Habitat for Humanity has higher standards, and they build homes for around $100,000.
Yeah, it's amazing what they do. And the detail that they put into it, you know, they talk about the extra nails they put in, the type of roof that's low wind resistance that they put in. They're starting to do more metal roofs. They're starting to actually get into some concrete houses in some areas, but the way they bracket the walls to the foundation and the roof to the walls, their houses hold up really well when there is a disaster. And historically, you don't usually hear about those houses getting wiped out. It's a lot of times it's the older homes or the really nice homes that are right on the beach that get leveled. And so it's the detail that can go into it. Resilient building, you know, we also talk about green building. If you have to build it twice, it's not green. You know, if you build a house that gets torn down and you've got to use all those resources to build it back, you're actually doing the environment a greater disservice than you did building it the first time. So you have to think about all those things and say, what is the best way to build this house that will give me the best chance of it surviving? And sometimes it's little things. You know, we have some friends here in Tampa that when we went over to their house the first time, their front door opened out. And we were making fun of them, going, this is so stupid. Who wants a front door that opens out? It's so unwelcoming. You're opening it into somebody's face. And then as I got into doing our film, I saw, well, that's probably the smartest front door you can have, because that door is not blowing in a hurricane, because that, you know, it's more wind resistant than a door that can just be pushed in. If the door opens out, the whole tension that's on that door when the wind is strong is dramatically different. So I called those guys and apologized for making fun of them because I did. And it's little things like that. It's having a door, your front door blowing in can destroy your house. It's having a garage that can withstand strong winds. Having the right windows in your house. There's so many things that people can do. We just have to motivate them to be paying attention and do them. And sure, it costs more, but the cost of not doing it is far greater. Let's just use a number of a house. Say you were building a $200,000 house, and they said, you know, but for $220,000,
right,
you can maybe put up a house that'll actually stick around.
Yeah,
that sounds like a lot of money, and for a lot of people it is. But take that $20,000, factor it in over a 30-year mortgage, and then factor in all the intangibles that are going to completely uproot your life when your house is destroyed, losing everything, potentially losing your job, God forbid, losing your life if you were still in the house.
right.
When you add up all those things, that 20,000 is not looking so bad anymore.
No, it's a no-brainer. It really is.
Yeah, it is. But you got to be sensitive to the point that, you know, if you're strapped for money and you're squeezing into a house that you can't afford, you tend to ignore things like that because you really want to get into the housing market. And there's a price to pay for that because it's also your biggest investment. And if you're going to put that much money into something, it's a good idea to make sure that it has a chance of surviving.
George, is it possible to prepare for all disasters?
I think that as our expert Roy Wright says it in our film, that if an EF5 tornado hits your house directly, there's probably not anything you can do.
Right.
But then in part of that preparation, you had a storm cellar, so you survived that. So there's always some little thing you could do. If you're living in an area where you have an older home, you make sure you have flood insurance. Even if you don't live in a flood area, if you don't live in a flood zone, flood insurance is not expensive. It's only expensive if you have a sea level house a block from the beach, and this rating for that is 9 feet. The insurance company is going to charge you a fortune for that. But the people in Houston from the hurricane that hit them, they didn't need, a lot of those people that were damaged didn't live in a flood area. They
No,
lived in an area that, unfortunately, they had to release a reservoir that
Yeah.
ended up flooding their homes, and they could have had purchased flood insurance that we were told for $300. That could have made the difference between them getting whole again or not after their house was flooded. So there's always something, whether it's inventorying your property. You know, if you don't have a record of everything that you have in some fashion, how's the insurance company going to believe you?
right,
They're not.
right.
You know, we heard a statistic. I heard a statistic from a guy that said 60 or 70% of claims are denied the first time you make them after a disaster. I
Wow.
haven't researched that to know if it's true, but I've heard that in other areas of insurance, because a certain percentage of people are going to just figure they're screwed and they're just going to move on rather than fight it. And so if that's going to happen, the people that are going to get paid are the ones that can present a case to show that they actually had those things.
Right. You need to document what you have.
Yeah, I mean, the most
Film it
important
or
part,
whatever.
yeah, the most important part of insurance to us is that the company actually is going to give us back our money and then some.
Yeah.
But they don't like to just do that. They're not going to make it easy for you.
They like to get those premiums though.
They do. They love to get those premiums. And it makes me sick when you hear of insurance companies making money in a year when there's been major disasters, because you know they overcharged somebody, or they didn't pay out everything that everybody else had lost in that disaster. And, you know, that's the reality of it, is you want to do everything you can to improve your chances of being made whole after a disaster. They're not going to take your word for it. You can walk around your house with a cell phone and just take pictures of everything.
Sure. Or video.
Have a video,
Yeah.
do something to substantiate your case. And if they do reject you, you want to make sure that you know that you appeal. Don't just accept that on face value. Also, after a disaster, it brings out the best in people, the first responders, the people that come to help you right after a disaster. But then that layer of cockroaches in lower parts of society come preying on people, where they'll charge you $20,000 to put a tarp on your roof.
Yeah.
Or they'll come in and you assign your benefits over to them, so they now control your insurance money. And then they take forever to do the job, if ever. You know, we had a guy taking us around in Mexico Beach, who I understand is in jail now because of people he took advantage of.
Wow.
In that situation. And so it's horrible that you're a victim and then you're made a victim again. Because
Yeah.
when you're in that mode where you've just had a major disaster, and any white knight driving by is going to look like your savior. But a lot of them are there to take advantage of you.
You know, you made a very good point for the people out there in the audience. If you're not in a flood zone, get flood insurance. It's cheap and you never know. And I hear so many people that I know in Florida that don't live in floodplains don't have flood insurance. They just don't buy it.
No, and Brock Long said in our film, he goes, if it rains where you live, your house can flood.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty direct comment that really says what's true. And if you need to have those kind of things, and then if you have a year or two where you don't have a disaster, don't be one of those people that gets mad and goes, I can't believe I wasted money on that insurance the last couple of years. I'm not going to get it this year. Because Mother Nature has a way of finding us.
I can remember a few years back, we had a hurricane in Florida and they got flooded all the way up into Georgia, like into middle Georgia, if you can remember that. And they were never in a floodplain.
Absolutely. And then, you know, in our film, you remember the older gentleman, Mr. Corman in Malibu, who took the insurance off his collector cars because they weren't running, or his coins that he had in his coin collection. And those things melted in the storm. The car engine melted. And he just took the insurance off because he wasn't using it. Little things like that. People who live out in a remote area might have their house way underinsured because they don't have a mortgage. It's been in their family for years. You need to get as much insurance as you can. You know, obviously they're not going to give you what it might cost to rebuild it unless you have that clause in your policy that says they have to rebuild it to today's standards.
Right.
Read your policy. Most people have never even read their insurance policy. There's a reason it's 60 pages with little print.
Yeah.
You know, so if you don't feel like you're up to it, I ask my insurance agent. He probably is sick of me for all the questions that I've asked. But you know, you got to ask him.
It's a good point. George, what are some of the safest and most dangerous places to live in America? Disaster speaking, of course.
Wow, there's a lot of them. You know, to me, the scariest place to live in the country, I grew up there, is California, because it's earthquakes, it's mudslides, it's fires. The fires the last several years have just been horrific out there. So I would say California has a major weather bullseye. And then anywhere along the Gulf Coast is a potential target, from down in the Keys all the way up the East Coast, because we've seen what's happened in New Jersey before. We've seen what can happen in the Carolinas. We see what can happen in Texas from Harvey. We see along the Gulf Coast. Last year, Louisiana got hit by 4 hurricanes.
Right.
So, and then the Central Plains with tornadoes, Tornado Alley. No matter where you live, you can usually find a vulnerability. And if there's no vulnerability, there might be something about it that might make you not want to live there. I know a lot of people live in the desert, where maybe they have a monsoon every now and then, or a dust storm. Other than that, it's pretty quiet, but it's freaking hot a lot of the year.
Yeah.
And you have to enjoy the desert. I like the desert, but I don't know that I would want to live there. So the nicer the place, sometimes the bigger the boils.
What about the safest? Is there any place out there?
You know, a place I lived a lot of years, San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah.
Because it's far enough away from the coast, and you kind of know what the bad areas are by the 100-year flood plain. You know, if you don't live anywhere near a creek or a river, there's places you could live there and be safe for years. You know, there's probably places in Montana and the Dakotas, but then you have all that snow and cold weather.
Well, I was just in Rapid City, South Dakota, and they did have a major flood there a while back.
Yeah, they can definitely get flooding. So I don't know if there's an area that's perfect. I know that we went a long time without any problems in San Antonio, but we also had big storms there where creeks flooded and people 2 miles from the creek had their house flooded.
Right.
So, you know, you really have to know the area. On our website, there's a FEMA map on there that you can see, that you put in your address, and it shows you what the risk is in your neighborhood and what the rating is. And everybody should look at that. And and don't just look at your area, look uphill from you or downhill, you know, upstream, downstream, see what the other places around you, what their risks are, because it can end up being your problems. They build a dam somewhere or divert water somewhere like they did from Harvey, and all those poor people in Houston just were destroyed by that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Look around, what's around you.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that can end up happening, being a problem for you.
What should everybody be doing now to make sure their home is safe? Where does one start the process?
I think the first thing, if you're looking at a neighborhood, is to talk to neighbors, talk to people that have lived there for a while, and find out. When we first moved to Tampa, we were looking at houses, and we were looking at this one house, and a guy was walking by, and I said, "Hey, tell me what the street's like when it rains." And he goes, "The water goes right up to the front door of that house every time it rains." We didn't even go in. You know, thank you.
Good. Yeah.
And you can get a lot of information by talking to neighbors. Go look at that FEMA map of your neighborhood, and you know, we can Google anything now, anywhere we live, see what the historic history is of that area, because the more information you have, the more you can put into your choice. I mean, nobody really goes and analyzes the building code, but you can still read about, you know, you can Google those things, and if you Google Tampa, I mean, a lot of people move here, but if you Googled it, I don't know that you would, because we're one or two in the most vulnerable places to next get hit by a major disaster. So you're kind of rolling the dice when you move here to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. The film referred to a thermal camera that could be used with an iPhone or through an iPhone. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, Joel May, who is with BASF, showed us with his iPhone. There's a little thermal camera that you plug into it. You can walk around and you hold it on your walls, and it shows you where there could be moisture in the walls, or where there could be vulnerabilities as you go around your house. And he displayed that in the film, where he could see that the camera changed colors in the corner, and he knew that was where there was an air conditioning duct, But if there hadn't been a duct there, then that would have been an area that you would have had to be concerned about because something was going on behind that wall. And an inspector that takes that around and looks can have a very valuable tool. If you're going to get one, you need to do your research and try to get one that sometimes the cheapest one isn't the best one. Read the reviews and see what people say, or make sure when you're hiring a home inspector that they have one and that they'll go around and do it, because it's a lot easier to deal with those problems before you sign the contract than once you take possession of the house and you find out that you could be sitting on the sofa and it's windy outside and your hair is going to move.
So the thermal camera is just a separate thing. It's nothing to do with the iPhone then.
It hooks up. It can run off the iPhone. So it plugs into it. So that's what's cool about it. Is that iPhone, you can make a movie on an iPhone now. There's so many things you can do, and that's a pretty good app for it.
Okay. If it's not possible to make our home safer, what should we do?
Well, in this hot real estate market, I'd sell it, go move somewhere else.
Yeah.
You make it somebody else's problem and see if they do their research. I mean, ideally, there are things you could do. You could get in there and, you could put this foam in your attic that makes the envelope of the house tighter and can protect your roof if water tried to get in. It's a spray foam that they put in attics. You can have somebody, put hurricane brackets. It's a little intrusive in terms of what they have to cut away to do that, to make sure your walls are bracketed on properly. Change the windows in your house to make it safer. And if you're in an area, you see this, they did it a lot in Houston. It's not inexpensive, where people jack up their houses and raise the elevation of it. I don't know. I mean, that can be a costly fix to do, but it could make the difference. They did that at a lot of houses in Houston, where they jack them up and then they rebuild the foundation around it, so that house doesn't keep getting washed, getting hit by flooding.
Did you follow up on the people who were featured in the film, and how were most of them doing?
Most of them are doing pretty well. A bunch of them their houses are rebuilt now. I know it takes time in California. There was a rule in Malibu that unless you were building the exact same footprint that was on the lot originally, you had to go through a whole permitting process all over again, and it took a long time. So it's not always a slam dunk that you can just go rebuild your house. But you're still talking, that was a few years ago that we interviewed them. So that's a long process back to recovery. The houses are coming back in Mexico Beach, but it's going to be several more years before you would probably think it was completely back to normal.
What are some of the stories you found making the film that were the most memorable for you?
I would say the 91-year-old gentleman, Richard Corman, who had such a good attitude about rebuilding at 91 years old. I mean, I would probably just crawl into a corner and cry.
Yeah.
And he just had that pioneer spirit that he wasn't going to let anything get him down. And that was very inspirational. The Carradines, the other family that we interviewed in Malibu, I mean, they lost a lot. They had a lot of family heirlooms and things that just meant so much to them. And they were in a position where, no matter what your means are, when you lose everything that you have immediately, people think, well, if you're not, if you have the ability to get it back, but there's some things you can never get back. You don't get back things passed down from your family for years. You don't get back things your grandfather might have wanted the family to have, or your great grandfather. So everybody had a good attitude, although they were certainly scarred by thinking it shouldn't have happened. That, that whole thing in Malibu, because their fire department was called to another area to fight the fire, the next firefighters that came in to Malibu didn't know the area. So they weren't even sent into some streets to put the fire out. Yeah. And they made the statement that we have to let this one go. They were making choices of what they could fight and what they could not fight. And you can understand that possibly from their perspective. I'm sure firefighters want to fight fires. I'm sure they were very frustrated by it. But imagine if that was your house and they said, no, we can't get to that one.
Right.
Like, that doesn't mean anything to you.
Right. It's your house. Yeah.
My house. Yeah.
What did you learn in making the film?
that I never want to be in that position. I never want to end up having to rely on FEMA coming in, and then the insurance companies coming in, and then, you know, getting a temporary patch on whatever your damage is and salvaging what you can. I mean, I had a small taste of that when I lived in Michigan. Our basement flooded. We had sump pumps. A lot of people aren't familiar with that, but it just keeps water out of your house.
Right.
And keeps it flowing around the house. And that just went out. There was a power outage and the sump pump went out, and we had a foot of water in the basement. But a foot of water goes 3 or 4 feet up in your walls.
Yeah.
You store things in your basement that you like them, but you don't have them, so you have them in boxes. All my old tapes from broadcasting were ruined. The kids' toys were ruined. And then you have to deal with the companies that claim they come out and clean them. And nobody's going to clean your stuff to your satisfaction. I don't care how great they say they are. It was a horrible experience. We were fortunate that that was all. Nothing upstairs was damaged, but that was just a small taste of it. So what I learned is I don't want to be in that position. I want to do everything I can to avoid that.
And we hope everybody out there listening to this does the same thing. You made a documentary titled License to Parent. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's I think parenting is the most difficult job in the world, and we let anybody do it. You know, if you can reproduce, you can have a child.
No license required.
And no requirements whatsoever. The only thing you're going to get grilled on is when you're leaving the hospital, they may come out and make sure the car seat is attached properly.
Yeah.
And that's important. Let's not minimize that, but that's the least of your problems that you have facing you,
Right.
taking on that job of being a parent. And I just think that we're way underprepared as parents. We're way under supported in terms of community support, emotional support, and bad parenting costs society a tremendous amount of money. Because when you have a good kid, they're worth a certain amount to society. But if you have a bad kid, society pays for it. You know, everybody can bang their chest and say they have individual rights and freedoms. That's great if you live in a bubble. But
Right.
once your freedoms start tearing up the town, it's a different story. And so I was hoping to create a conversation where people would say, yep, this is an important job. Let's support parents more. Let's do more to help them. You know, it could be as little as when you see that kid screaming in the supermarket, you're not giving the evil eye to the mom, like she's ruining your shopping experience. Maybe a smile and a sympathetic comment, you know, just a pat on the back, something to not make them feel any worse about a situation that's probably pretty bad for them.
Yeah.
And you know, there are times when you see parents that just don't care what their kids are doing. They'll let them race around the restaurant, run
Yeah.
around the airplane, cruise the mall, and do whatever damage they want. That drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well, drives all of us crazy for sure.
Yeah.
What do you have planned for your next documentary, and what are you most excited about going forward?
Well, you know, possibly some further development of the idea about the last house standing and what it's like for people trying to get their feet back on the ground, maybe a little more in detail, and then some other stuff I can't really talk about right now that I'm working on. But you know, when you finish one and then you go to the next one, you have that it's like you're looking up a mountain and you see all that you have to do to make it happen.
Right.
So I'm juggling a lot of balls, trying to figure out which project will go next, and hopefully we'll jump on it.
Well, when you finish your next project, maybe you can come back and tell us about it.
That would be awesome. I would sure
Okay.
appreciate that. We want to make sure that everybody that listens to you goes to thelasthousestanding.org.
Yeah, that's my next question. How can people access your film, and can they contact you if they wanted to talk to you?
Absolutely. There's contact on the page on thelasthousestanding.org. If you're having an event or something and you want to have a film screening at it, we can make that happen for you. But you can rent the film right on our website. And also it's starting to appear on certain public television stations slowly around the country. And I've just been informed that we're on Tubi now, which is a service that people can watch movies for free.
Yeah.
And it's on there, and so is License to Parent. And I just encourage people to check it out. I think that, you know, I'm really proud of the film. A lot of work went into it, but I think it can make a difference for people. You know, you look at when you're a producer, director, you do a lot of different projects, and some you're happy with, some you're not. This one I really think matters and can make a big difference for people. So I hope they visit the website. We also have a great resources page on there where they can see a lot of different things they could do to make their house safer. And so it's a lot of good information. And if they have any questions, my contact's on there, and I hope they reach out to me.
Well, I'm going to include all that information in the podcast notes, and we are going to be putting the documentary on our Facebook page. So
Awesome.
People will see it. They come to my Facebook page. Thank you so much, George, for spending time with us, and I wish you all the best in your future work. We welcome all comments and suggestions to improve the podcast. You can email me at itsarapwithrap@gmail.com. Facebook, It's a Rap with Rap. The website is itsarapwithrap.com. Thanks everyone for listening and making the podcast grow in listenership. We appreciate all of you that share these podcasts to your friends and family. Want everybody to please stay safe. And for now, it's a wrap.